Good morning, everybody. Today's video is going to be a review and a first impressions of the Bareminerals BARESKIN Pure Brightening Serum Foundation. This one here is just the sample size, but I wanted to give it a go first. I've heard some great things about this product, so I wanted to give it a go first before I go and actually purchase the full-size product. So I thought I would show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put primer on half my face, Bare on the other half, put on the foundation, then we're going to do a full face, see how it kind of holds up, and then we'll check back in probably later today to see if it's oxidized, if it's moved, what the whole situation is. So let's just get right started. So I'm just using the Maybelline New York Master Prime Face Studio Primer, and like I said, I'm going to put primer on this side of my face, and then we'll put the foundation on the entire face, just to see if it holds up as well without a primer, or if you definitely need a primer with it. Okay, so that's the only thing I have on my face. Wow, you can actually see the difference between primer and then not. It just kind of evens things out a little bit. Look at that. I've never actually noticed that before. Huh, so primer, no primer. Okay, so we're gonna be using a beauty blender for this. Mine is absolutely disgustingly dirty, so please ignore that. So I'm gonna apply a little bit to my face, and then we're just gonna blend it out with the beauty blender. We'll give it a shake. This is a very liquidy product. Just make sure that it's all mixed together. Trying applying it to one half of my face at a time because I don't want any of that primer to be mixed up. So this is in the shade Bare Linen, which is 03, and I feel like it actually matches my skin tone pretty well. Like you can see, obviously I've got some redness going on there, but it matches my neck quite well. So now with the beauty blender, I'm going to actually blend the side that doesn't have the primer, and then we'll go over to the side with the primer. Okay, so I've got it blended on one side. So as you can see, you can still see some of the coloring underneath, so it's a very, very light finish. One thing I have noticed though is that I don't think you could use a makeup brush with this because it is such a light product. I feel like you just move it around. So I kind of swiped it a little bit with my beauty blender just to see, and it kind of moves the product along and not blends it into your skin. So you would definitely, I think, need to use a beauty blender and kind of pat it onto your skin. Otherwise you're just gonna be pushing the product everywhere and not actually letting it sit where you need to sit. So again, that's the side there without the primer, or yeah, without the primer, and so far pretty good. Like I said, it's very light. It kind of sinks into my lines there, and you can still see some of the coloring underneath. So it might need a second coat, so I'll take a look after once I'm done with the primer side, and then we might need to put another coat on, and we'll see if it's buildable. Okay, so there's one coat with the primer, and there's one coat without the primer, so I'll just kind of split face there. So one thing I've already noticed is because it is such a lightweight, I feel like it sits in my wrinkles quite a bit. Even with the primer, it kind of creases in those fine lines. Well, they're not really that fine, but in my lines, especially on my forehead. I don't know if you can see that and see that it still rests. So may have to use a setting powder definitely with this, but even with a primer, it's still, see, you can still see that it's there. So I'm not too sure if that's just because it's very, very lightweight. This primer I love, so it's not as though it's the primer's fault, because this primer I find works really, really well for my skin. You can still see some of the redness, and see there, see it's sinking, you can see it's kind of creasing there. You see that? So, don't know how I feel about that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go and put another, oh, see, look at the forehead. Oh, let it focus. You see that? So it's a little bit less with the primer, but look how much, those aren't wrinkles. That's just the creasing that is left. Not cool. So I'm just gonna go and put it on another coat just to see if it is a buildable product and see if it can kind of solve some of the redness. But I have a feeling that it's gonna sink into those lines regardless of how much or how little I actually use. Okay, so that's the second coat there. It got rid of the redness a little bit more. But like I said, I'm really afraid of that second coat, so I'm trying not to use as many facial expressions as possible because I don't want it sinking into those lines. Like, so here's my forehead. You see that? Like it literally just cakes up in my lines. So now I'm just gonna go and put a setting powder. Again, this setting powder, I have used it over and over and over again because it works really, really well for me. So I know that this is a good setting powder for my skin tone and, you know, my lines that I have. So we'll see if that can kind of help it. Because right now you definitely need a setting powder. Otherwise, you're just gonna permanently, see, look at that. Look at that, see? And it just kind of cakes in there. So I'm just gonna go and put that setting powder and we'll see if that kind of helps combat the, you know, the creasing that it is definitely causing. Oh, see? So again, this is just my Rimmel Stay Matte. You can see that I love it. I purchased this over and over and over again and drop it on myself apparently. Even with that setting powder, it has still sunken into the lines on my forehead. So it's a very oily finish, like a very dewy finish, which I personally don't like because I have oily enough skin as it is. I don't want to add more attention to that. Like, I know I have lines there and they do usually still show, but I've never had a foundation sit in there and then crease like around the line to accentuate it even more. I'm not a fan. So even with more setting powder, it has now just become cakey. Like, it just looks like I am wearing 9 layers of foundation and powder. And even with the setting powder on top, you can't really pick it up in the camera, but it has streaked it. So it doesn't actually sit. You can see on my nose that it's coming through because it doesn't actually go into your skin. I feel like it just kind of sits on top, and the second that you do something, it just moves the product. So, first impressions, I liked the lightweight finish of it. Well, no, let me rephrase that. I liked the lightweight consistency of it. The finish on my skin is horrendous. It sits in these lines. Okay, see that? So I'm not frowning, I'm not making, it has just creased the actual foundation and made it look like I permanently have lines on my forehead, which I don't. I know that they're there, I have accepted them, but the makeup makes it look like they're consistently there. It doesn't stay put where you need it. You can see how red my nose is because I do have reddening pigmentation on my face. You can see that it was perfectly covered there, but the second that you touch it again, it doesn't sit. This side of the face here has primer, this side of the face does not, and it doesn't really seem to make a huge difference. Well, a little bit, there's a little bit more redness, but let's see if I can, okay, so I'll smile. Look at that. So it still just creases up in those lines. It looks very cakey because you do have to use a setting powder with it. So I did, and it didn't seem to help the situation. So I don't really know how I would be able to make this foundation work. Maybe mixing it with something that maybe has a bit of a thicker consistency that's a little bit more full coverage. But I would just be concerned about it settling in those lines. So generally I like Bareminerals products, but this Bare Skin foundation, wah wah.